Everything that Israel tells you about its founding, about its history, and about its role today is a lie. Some people think, oh, Israel was founded for Holocaust survivors, and then it got greedy and took over too much land and ruined its founding mission, which was to be a safe haven for Jews. The truth is, it was founded on ethnic cleansing. It was not a utopia. I think it's really eye-opening to look at the actual language of early Zionists, because they were calling their banks colonial trusts. They were talking about how natives always resist colonists. In other words, it's not just critics of Zionism who describe Zionism as colonial, it was the Zionists themselves. Israeli society really had a lot of disdain for Holocaust survivors, so they did something very disgusting. They both weaponized the Holocaust to justify their extermination of Palestinians, and they mistreated Holocaust survivors. In fact, they even referred to them as sapon, which means soap in Hebrew. And that was because there was a myth that Nazis turned Jewish bodies into soap. It's not true, but that was a myth. And the important thing is that people thought that was true, and they thought it would be appropriate to call survivors by that name. Israel wanted to create a new Jew that was armed, that was working the land. They were ashamed of the Jews who were killed. They thought that they went to their slaughter like sheep. They were ashamed of Jews who were religious, Jews who were scholars, Jews who were also cosmopolitan. They really did, ironically, internalize a lot of anti-Semitism. There were Zionist bombings in the Middle East that were used to scare people into emigrating out of Iraq, out of Morocco, and into Israel. That's how little they cared about Jewish people. They bombed synagogues in order to get people to leave the Middle East and go to Israel, where they would be mistreated, which is what happened to Mizrahi Jews. Some were basically put into camps. They rejected Yiddish, which was spoken by Eastern European and diasporic Jews, and they also rejected Arabic, which was spoken by Mizrahi Jews of the Middle East. Yiddish is an amazing language, and it's dying out, and the reason it's dying out is because Israel chose to create modern Hebrew, which no one spoke, and they had a lot of disdain for a lot of Jewish culture. So Israel has always been a racist project in many ways, against Palestinians, but even against Jews themselves. And it's been an anti-Semitic project as well. Not only is Judaism obviously much older than Zionism, but there was Christian Zionism from the very beginning, and that was fueled by anti-Semitism and the desire to get Jews out of Europe. Lord Balfour of the Balfour Declaration was a major anti-Semite. Zionism actually requires anti-Semitism to justify its existence. So for Zionists, they don't want to defeat anti-Semitism. They want to use it to strengthen the state of Israel. It's also true to remember that this is not a conflict about religion or culture. Jews and Christians and Muslims lived in peace, in harmony in many areas of the Middle East for centuries. This is about power. This is about land. This goes back to resources. This goes back to the West wanting to have a foothold in the Middle East. This is not about religion. Jewish anti-Zionism has existed since Zionism. A lot of Jews opposed Zionism because they, I would say rightly, predicted it would create anti-Semitism. Israel is unsustainable. There's no coming back from this. Something new needs to be created. Jews can live side by side with Muslims and Christians in Palestine, just as they have for centuries. If coexistence is so impossible, and if anti-Semitism is so impossible to fight against, how is it that Jews live in Germany today? Germany was where anti-Semitism turned into the Holocaust, and yet somehow Jews are able to live in Germany in safety. But we're supposed to believe that they can't live in Palestine in safety? Palestine is not the country that created Adolf Hitler. Palestine is not the country that created the Holocaust. The biggest threat to Jewish safety is not a free Palestine, it's Zionism.
Exactly 15 days before the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu presented a map of the new Middle East without Palestine during his September 22, 2023 address to the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Youssef Munayyer wrote on X at 10:18 a.m. on September 22, 2023. In case there is any doubt, Netanyahu made clear with his little map today what normalization really seeks, eliminating Palestine and Palestinians from the region and legitimizing Greater Israel, all with the blessing of Arab regimes. The Middle East Eye noted that the inclusion of Palestinian lands, and sometimes land belonging to Syria and Lebanon, in Israeli maps is common among believers of the concept of Eretz Yisrael, Greater Israel, a key part of ultra-nationalist Zionism that claims all of these lands belong to a Zionist state. Earlier this year, Netanyahu's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, spoke from a podium adorned with a map that also included Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria as part of Greater Israel. In the same event, he said there was no such thing as Palestinians.
Netanyahu is on a roll of just admitting day after day that his harshest critics from day one were 100% correct. So let me walk you through this here. The Times of Israel has the following as a headline. Netanyahu says he's on a historic and spiritual mission, feels a connection to a vision of Greater Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tells I-24 he feels he is on a historic and spiritual mission, a mission from God, that he is very attached to the vision of Greater Israel, which includes areas slated for a future Palestinian state and possibly also areas that are part of present-day Jordan and Egypt. So this is what we were warning you of. And I remember we said this super early on. It was maybe only a month into the genocide, and we started having the conversation about the Greater Israel Project. And at the time, if you said it, you would be smeared as an anti-Semite. You would be smeared as, a Nazi for pointing out that this is on the table and this is something that the Israeli government is considering. Well, now you have Netanyahu himself, the prime minister of Israel, the guy who's doing the genocide and the ethnic cleansing, coming out and saying, yeah, I'm on a spiritual mission to create a Greater Israel. So understand what that means. That doesn't, some people might hear that and they might think, okay, well, that means they're trying to take the Gaza Strip and that means they're trying to take the West Bank. Well, I'm here to tell you, no, it is not just that. It is not just the Gaza Strip. It is not just the West Bank. When they talk about a Greater Israel Project, this is what the Greater Israel Project looks like. So you have parts of Saudi Arabia, parts of Iraq, parts of Syria, parts of Jordan, Lebanon, parts of Egypt. Like, that's all gone. Let's remember, Israel has been nonstop bombing Lebanon for an extended period of time now, and they've always gone back and forth with them pretty aggressively. We know that ever since Bashar al-Assad was toppled in Syria, now you have a former al-Qaeda leader who runs Syria. But what did Israel do? They bulldozed their way in, took large swaths of Syria beyond just the Golan Heights, which they had previously. They stole that previously. And they took large swaths almost all the way up to Damascus. And they repeatedly started bombing Syria. And then, of course, the other point is, we talked about this the other day, Netanyahu's office came out and said, we're going to reoccupy all of Gaza. The decision has been made. We are going to reoccupy all of Gaza. Well, again, we were told, hey, this is defensive. This is to get back over October 7th. We're only going after Hamas. We're only targeting the bad guys. And now, what part of a defensive war where you only go after the bad guys, what part of that includes ethnically cleanse over 2 million people and steal the entire Gaza Strip and reoccupy it, resettle it? By definition, that is not defensive. That is offensive. The international community has to have a moment here. They have to look in the mirror. They have to ask themselves, do we want to live in a world where it's law of the jungle, might makes right, or do we want the Nuremberg Tribunal and the Geneva Conventions and the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, do we want that to matter? Do we want that to matter? Because if we let Israel continue down this path, I hate to tell you, we are no better than the humans of the fucking 1400s, 1500s, 1600s. We're no better than the humans of the 1930s and 1940s with the Nazis and their atrocities in World War II. The whole idea after that was, hey, let's never do anything like that again. Let's have some rules of the road that the international community holds everybody accountable to. And now here we are, 2 years into those rules not being followed, being destroyed right in front of our faces, and everybody sitting around with their thumbs up their asses and acting like everything's okay. Everything's not okay. It is not okay. Not a single one of us is safe in a world where Israel gets away with what they've been getting away with. This country single-handedly destroyed the entire international law framework right in front of our fucking eyes. And don't let anybody gaslight you and pretend like that's not the case. Because we all know that's the case. We all see it with our own two eyes.